guys, welcome back. It's Josh with the Financial Advisor Car Guy. This week I want to talk a little bit about auto auctions. I know I've done a couple episodes on this in the past, but the reason for today's episode is because I was watching Barrett Jackson that just took place, I want to say it was in Scottsdale. Regardless, I follow them on social media, and so I see a lot of these really high-priced cars. And that's what prompted, my thought process for this episode was, just to kind of talk about the fact that there's big money in cars still, even though, people every day seem to think that the economy is falling apart and things aren't good and interest rates are high and the market isn't doing great and whatever, right? All the things. Well, I would tell you that there are still people that have money and they still have money to spend. And so if you go to the Barrett Jackson Facebook page, this is a great example. I was just on it earlier today and I was just scrolling down, right? I mean, literally the first 10 or 12 cars that they posted. Now, granted, there's a few solicitations in there, a couple of calendar reminders for the upcoming Florida Barrett Jackson auction and all these things. But if you look at just the cars, okay, first and foremost, there's not one, again, in those first 10 that didn't sell for roughly $250,000 or more. Now, I'm going to pause there for a moment and share with you that Barrett Jackson's not going to show you a car that sold for $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 when they have these big dollar cars, right? That's what they want to advertise, because what it does is it takes people like you and I who have cars, right? And think, well, maybe I want to get out of this one or that one or, whatever. And so I start looking online at what's been selling and what it's been selling for. And now all of a sudden, let's say a GT500 sold for, $400,000, which one did. Let's say that my replica, it's worth less than half, but is it worth 25% of what a real one is? So if a real one sells for 400 grand, does that make this worth $100,000? I don't know. It's worth whatever the next guy is willing to pay. And if I were going to sell it, I'd probably throw some crazy number on it in hopes that it would stick. But I digress. If you go to the Barrett Jackson Facebook page, you're going to see in the first, like I said, first 10 posts, you're going to see 3 or 4 Mustangs. I think there was a Boss 429, there was GT500, there's a full carbon bodied GT500 in Eleanor. And those cars all sold for 400, 450, 490,000, something like that. There were 2 or 3 Ferraris that also sold for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. I saw a Ford GT sell for over $500,000. And so there are still people out there that are spending big money on big cars. And so there's an industry and a market for that. But what I'll tell you is it's shocking how many of them are custom, okay? When an enthusiast buys a project car to restore, there's one of 2 routes you can take. It either is an OEM type build that puts it back to stock as if it were new, or there's kind of that resto mod approach where you're going to go out on a limb a little bit and maybe you're going to add big wheels and maybe you're going to do this, that, and the other. And it's up to the owner to decide what they want that build to look like. Well, at Barrett Jackson, again, if you look at these auctions, if you look at their lineup, they're not always marked as resto mods. They're maybe they use the word custom, they use the word one-off, they use the words, unique. They'll use words that describe it in such a way. It is a resto mod. They're just not using that term because I would say that a lot of the auto industry has kind of a stigma around that word. And I would tell you that unless you are, there's a lot of purists in the industry that want an originally built car or a car that was built to be very original. I would tell you that my 55 Ford pickup, it's sitting right out here in the driveway. That's one of those vehicles that if I search for it on social media, I see the 2 extreme opposites. I see trucks that were built to look like they were brand new in 1955, and they'll use OEM colors. They'll use OEM options. They're not going to put airbags. They're not going to put 20-inch or bigger rims on there. They're not going to swap out the motor for a big block or, any of those things. They're just not going to do any of it. They may do they'll rebuild the original engine. They'll rebuild the original transmission. they'll put new shocks, they'll put new suspension components and things, but it's all OEM replaced stuff. So it's just the new version of the old, so that they can say this is how it rolled off the assembly line, right? And there are investors, there are collectors that look for that. But again, turn the page and there's collectors and investors that are looking for a vehicle that will compete with a brand new car. They want to get in, they want to drive it hard, they want to drive it fast, they want to drive it reliably. A lot of old vehicles just aren't reliable. They will break down, they will have issues, they overheat. You know, the cooling systems back in the day weren't what they are today. You can put a much larger radiator and big electric fans and all these things in a engine bay to keep things cool. And they just didn't do that back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s even. You know, I don't know what the first electric fan was that went into a car. I would guess late 80s, maybe 70s, but certainly not before that. And so, you know, the long and short of it is, if you're in the market for one of these custom built cars, you're probably going to pay a pretty hefty premium for it, because there are a lot of them, I'll just say, going to a lot of these high-end collectors and a lot of these high-end investors. And, you know, if you remember through COVID, car prices were actually like ticking up. You know, supply and demand, people were buying cars for way over what dealer MSRP should have been. Used cars demanded a premium. In some cases, used cars were more than a new car would have been had they had a new car on the lot. And, you know, I think about the R8, it's a great example of this, right? We watched those prices go from, you know, let's call it $60,000 or $65,000, clear up to like 90 for the exact same car during COVID, and then just out of the pandemic, same story. And then they've slowly come back down and sort of plateaued again at that $60,000 to $70,000 price range. So anybody who's got one is sitting on $60,000 or $70,000, regardless of where the rest of the world goes. But they're not building them anymore, so there's a collectible piece to that. I don't know. I mean, cars are a funny thing because they're meant to be driven, and I'm super guilty of not driving them. Like this one, it sits there with the cover on it. I pull it down, I pull it out, I'll wash it, I'll put it in a car show, back it up, put it up, and it's done. And I'll do that a couple times a year for different various car shows. And many times while it's out, I'll drive it, you know, I'll drive it to work, I'll drive it around town a couple times, whatever, before I put it up and cover it up again. But they're really designed to be driven. And, you know, I think where the collectible piece is, if this car, right, it's got 42,000 miles on it. I think I bought it with 39. I don't drive it that often. And when I do, I don't put a lot of miles on it. I'll commute, you know, so I'll take my kids to school, I'll go to work, I'll pick my kids up, I'll come home. In an average day, I'm probably putting 2 or 3 miles on it. And so I can drive it for a couple months before going back to the gas station. And I don't drive it when there's nasty weather or when there's cinder on the roads from snow or mud, you know, whatever, anything like that. I'm pretty selective in when I drive it. It's got to be a beautiful sunny day, much like it was yesterday. I drove it, much like it is today. I might drive it. So, you know, it's one of those things where a collector is acquiring these cars at these auctions, and hopefully they use them, but sometimes they don't. And again, I digress. The reason I share this with you is there's a huge opportunity if you're handy with a wrench. There's still deals out there, and you can buy a car that runs and drives and looks nice, but customize it or not and go back the stock route. And there's some money to be made on some of these deals occasionally. Now, Barrett Jackson has pretty large buyer's premiums. They charge commissions on the sale. So if you list your car with them, if it goes across the block, you know, whatever it is, they're going to charge you for that. But there are some big players at these auctions. And I mean, like I mentioned to you, I went to the MAG auction. In fact, you can see my, that dangling card right there. That was from when I was in Reno last year. So, you know, 6 months back, I went to that Reno auction. There were some big ticket cars. I mean, not everything garnished top dollar, but there were some that went well. And I don't know. I mean, people are still throwing money around. And I get it, it's probably the super rich and they just buy these cars and collect them and they put them in a museum or they put them in their shop and throw a cover on them and never touch them again. Could be some of that. But with that said, with the more of that happening, again, supply and demand. So if you get these big time collectors that are acquiring all these cars and storing them, you're gonna see less on the road, which I would argue it's gonna make desirability go up, which means normal Joes like you and I who have these types of cars can get more for them when we go to sell them later on. So anyway, there's a whole economics around it, but the Barrett Jackson auctions kind of revitalized my thinking about this because for a while, I mean, life gets busy, right? I'm not always looking at used cars. And so for me, seeing this auto auction where cars are selling for $500,000 and $600,000 and $700,000, it's kind of eye-opening, right? I can really get lost in some of that. But at the same time, I know that there are opportunities to find a good deal on something, work on it, modify it, get it the way you like it, enjoy it. And then when you're done, you can sell it. And that's honestly my goal with my 55. I feel like I got a very fair price for all the things that were already done. I don't have to do a whole lot. I could truly enjoy it and drive it the way it is. And they're not making any more 1955 Ford F-100s. In fact, they're the opposite, right? They're wrecking them. They're getting wrecked. They're getting parted out. They're whatever it is. And so there is a finite number of those trucks out there and they're getting more desirable. So should I have bought one 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Absolutely, right? I could have got them for way less money. I could have bought it for a lot less money. But again, I'm satisfied with the truck where it is. I am working on the interior. Remember this whole table right here full of parts? That's all interior parts. That needs to get going. And these beautiful sunny days that we're having here, even though it's still February, now it's March, we should be able to, I should be able to make some time to get that stuff on the truck and going. And so the long and short of it is, pay attention. If you're in the market for a project and your end goal is to flip it, go to the Barrett Jackson page and see what's selling, see what people are paying for certain cars. And the other thing you could do is look at Bring a Trailer, right? I've looked at that website 1,000 times. And it has everything. I mean, all cars from all walks of life. Most of them are either custom resto mods or low mileage originals or restored to original, if it's an old car. But I see R8s on there. Oftentimes they're gated or V10s or whatever. They're the more desirable, more low number produced or whatever it is. But I don't know, this is such a rare color. I never see these come up for sale. So when and if I choose to sell mine, that's a selling point because someone who doesn't want a black one or a white one or a silver one like everybody else has, they might want something a little bit different. So be unique, but keep an eye out for opportunities. Be opportunistic and really just understand what you're doing before you get into it. So that's all I got for you guys this time, but don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below if you have any questions or concerns. But most importantly, remember, may every investment you make be a good one. Till next time.